Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, good to talk with you here again. And, I like to think about replays as something more than just a bunch of like old guys sitting around playing with baseball games. The old guy playing around with the game that only old people tend to understand, thinking about the good old days back before they brought out all these newfangled statistics and started to screw things up and all that stuff. I like thinking about it more in terms of literature and in terms of things that are really interesting for us because they tell a story and because they make us interested in how other people think and how they live their lives. There's been a real big influence on me as I was considering creating a YouTube page and thinking about creating a blog. It's also something I found that's quite time consuming, but is very rewarding when I give it the time that it really deserves. Case in point is an old issue of the APBA Journal. Now, I haven't really talked a whole ton about the APBA Journal yet. I'm still waiting to get through my long spiel on national pastime before we go talk about APBA and set things up for the APBA Journal on my blog to give you an idea of kind of where we're going. But I'll tell you this, when I was a kid, we used to have a couple of old APBA Journal issues hanging around the house, and there were some that I remember very, very well, and some parts of these that would really make me feel really interested in replays and what it was really like and in trying to be part of this kind of strange world that nobody else seemed to know about. Case in point is this issue that I'm going to show you here. This is from the April 1984 issue of the APBA Journal. As you can see here in all of its scanned glory, this comes straight from that the person who owns the APBA Journal, who sells these scans of old issues on eBay for, I think it's like $100 or something for a USB stick. When you consider how many issues you're talking about, it actually is a great bargain, right? You can't buy physical copies of the APBA Journal for that cheap, considering that you have, I can't even remember how many years worth you have. It's like 30, probably like 36 years worth or something, 12 issues per year. I mean, this one, for example, retailed for $1.25. If you were to find it in a store, you weren't going to find it in a store anywhere, of course, because nobody had this. And I remember when I was a kid being really upset that I'd go to the local library, right, and find Nintendo Power magazine. So it tells you when I was a kid, right, late 80s, early 90s, they had tons of Nintendo Power, but they didn't have any of the APBA Journal. I remember thinking, what's wrong with them? This is much more interesting than the pictures in Nintendo Power. As you can see, from an early age, I was kind of doomed to have this hobby. Anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff here, especially when we get to the APBA Journal right around 1984. So we'll skip over Rick Judd. We'll skip over good old Robert Henry, right? And as much as we love him, skip over Howard Alshkog. We'll skip over this football stuff. Who cares about that? And so we'll go here straight to APBA Alone. This was Daryl Hollis's old column. I think that Daryl has passed away. I read something about that somewhere. Always kind of wondered what happened to him. I don't live in Falls Church, but this actually isn't that far away from where I live right now. And I found that there's a lot of APBA activity that happens here in the sort of mid-Atlantic region. Interesting stuff. But the thing I really want to focus on is not just the APBA Alone itself and talking about avoiding overuse of pictures in a replay, something I see people talk about on message boards to this day. No, we want to focus in on this right here, this Anatomy of a Replay by Casey Stevens. This is actually the second in what I think is a 4-part series. He was replaying the 1948 replay and keeping a diary at the same time. And there's all sorts of interesting things here, including things that should be warning signs to those of us who like to play in the hobby, right? So the very first entry here, January 20th, 1983. Dear Diary, I think Susan, presumably his wife, is getting a little bit jealous of all the time I'm spending with you in my 1948 American League replay. That extra inning game on our anniversary just about ended our marriage. I had to hide my cards for a week. See, that alone, right? That alone has literary merit and literary value. That's what I want to say. That's fascinating stuff, right? Now, it's awful. It's awful to say, oh my gosh, this guy, such a moron, is playing, APBA instead of paying attention to his wife on his anniversary, right? But that's fascinating because you can see how, real life is intersecting with this like imaginary world. We talk about, you've read that book, right? The Universal Baseball Association from the 60s, and the guy who can't really distinguish between the two, right? Well, this is almost like a page straight out of that, right? Except it's real, right? This isn't like, oh, well, this guy imagined this and then he had some rare play where his favorite pitcher died and sorry, I just spoiled the whole book for you. But instead of that, what we have here is, oh my gosh, this game is so much fun, and I love this replay, playing with 1948, what a fascinating season. But I got so into this that my wife wants to leave me. I had to hide the cards away. I couldn't do very much with it, And you can see here, what does he have? He has results of games that are written out here. Here's what happened with this one. Ted Williams hit 2 home runs in that game, and so on and so forth. And he's saying, yeah, I'm working upstate New York, and so we're going to go over to Cooperstown instead. And we're going to start rummaging through what? 1948 sporting news issues in the Hall of Fame library. I wonder if they still have those, right? Because, I mean, the newsprint was not exactly built to last. Anyway, you can find it on paper of record. You don't need to do this. I became interested in the 1948 National League race as well, which was really, really interesting. And then he goes through and starts talking about the season. You can see that he's kind of skipping between the National League and the American League races. And I think that he started the National League race here and then only like rarely put things in. Really, really interesting. And yep, talking here about other stuff. Move, a 6-month-old child. There's been not much time for much of anything, but we do have some time to play a 20-inning marathon game and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. I mean, you can get this for yourself. You can read it for yourself if you want. But for me, this sort of thing is absolutely fascinating, right? This is actually more interesting to me than even the this news report of a no-hitter that this guy had, his first no-hitter. This is very, very interesting because of how real life mixes in with the replay and how we can really see into the psychology of the replay, and we can see a lot of the stuff that's going on, a lot of the stuff that you have to go through, and a lot of the thoughts that go through it. We think a lot about these replays as being a way for us to escape and a way for us to, kind of put off, the really boring and mundane things of the world and enjoy it. I mean, that itself is kind of a literary experience anyway, but for me, the real fascinating thing is when we have that intersection between real life and replay life, and whereas on the one side, we're thinking about Ralph Kiner finally hitting his first home run on May 8th, 1948. At the same time, we're thinking about, our daughter who's 6 months old, or the fact that our wife is really upset with us for having this time-consuming project, and being a coach in the summer and doing all sorts of other things, and so on and so forth. So there you have it. There's other stuff here that you can see, and we'll see other issues of the APBA Journal. We'll go through them slowly. Here you have a 1908 replay with not much by way of statistics. I'm not sure what happened. Oh, here we go. With the standings and with all these stats and stuff. Like, a lot of people like talking about this. My replay is done. Here's my write-up. Here were the leaders. Here is how everything finished. I used to like how they would do this, where they would put down, the standings next to the real life standings. You can see clearly how did the hits line up, how did everything else line up. Sometimes there's a little bit of commentary here about how it was played and exactly what happened. Right? They put in the famous Merkle tie, but it ended up being useless. Any good replayer will tell you that it's not going to work out the way it did in real life. It never does. Oh, this is Arnie Ziels. Yeah, this is another famous name. He worked for Stats Incorporated. I found him on Twitter not long ago. Anyway, as fascinating as this sort of thing is, though, give me this any day over that. This is really, really interesting because this is getting into the mind of the replayer and not just, oh, look, here are statistics, look at the pretty numbers, right? You can kind of see where I'm coming from when I say things like that. It's also kind of a theme that I think you've seen here on the blog and on the channel. As fun and as exciting as the numbers are, as much fun as it is to talk about and fight about like war and stuff like that with people, to be honest with you, it's not really that interesting. I'm much more interested in the actual game itself. All right, we'll have other videos here in the near future probably that will talk about things from that perspective. But numbers are numbers. But give me a real story. Give me a replay any day of the week. I really want to be a replayer, and I want to be one who cares about replays and who knows about replays and who talks about replays. That's where my heart really is at. Love to know what you think. Talk with you later. Bye bye.